Have you ever experienced fraud? If not, then you probably know somebody who has. And if you have, then you probably know how much of a pain it is. Last year, in 2022, consumers reported losing $8.8 billion to fraud scams, which is more than a 30% increase from 2021. Over the next few minutes, we'll discuss some of the most common fraud scams and best practices on how to protect yourself. So, let's get started. Hello everyone, I'm Tawny with HeroBanker.com, and we're your friendly neighborhood bankers. These days, fraud is everywhere, and it's almost impossible to avoid. With the rise of financial technologies, fraud has become extremely sophisticated and even more difficult to uncover. We can only hope that banks are always going to detect fraud and protect us from scams. But the truth is, that's impossible. So, now, more than ever, it's important to understand how fraud scams work and how we can best protect ourselves and our money. Another important note is that with most of these scams, the banks are not liable. So, this means that if you fall victim to one, more than likely, you will not get your money back. This differs from something like credit card fraud, where you can file a claim and recover those stolen funds. So this is just another reason why it's important to be aware. Before we get into the different types of fraud, we want to point out our rule number 1 when it comes to protecting yourself. The majority of fraud occurs when someone reaches out to you pretending to be someone that they're not. You will see that this is a major theme amongst all the scams that we talk about today. So, rule number 1 of fraud protection is this. If someone is reaching out to you, then you need to be on high alert. You should not provide anyone with any information until you're able to confirm who you're speaking with. As we get into the scams and the details, we'll cover how this can be done. But again, if someone is reaching out to you and asking for personal information, then this should be a major red flag. The first scam that we're going to discuss today is phishing. This is the most common and easily deployed scam that is currently operating. There's actually many different types of phishing, but the concept and techniques are all very similar. A fraudster will contact you via email, text, or phone and pretend to be a representative from a legitimate organization or company, such as your bank. Usually, their tactic is tricking you into sharing your personal information. They will then turn around and use your personal information to take money out of your accounts. Phishing is a play on the word phishing. It's called phishing because scammers are literally sending out thousands or millions of these fraudulent emails and texts. So this is similar to a fisherman throwing out his hook in hopes of catching something. Some people will ignore or simply delete the email, but the fraudsters only need a few people to bite the hook for them to make money. Phishing is especially dangerous because it has evolved with the rise of technology and the way that people communicate, making it easy to target new victims. One form of phishing currently on the rise is called smishing. The term smishing is a play on SMS or texting. Basically, instead of sending a fraudulent email, the scammers send fraudulent texts. Again, with the same intent of tricking the victim into sharing their personal information. Here's a quick example of what a phishing scam looks like. A scammer may send a text or email that your bank account has been locked due to suspicious activity. The text is requesting that you click on the included link in order to review the suspicious activity. This obviously sounds troubling, so you might click it. Then, you are led to a website that looks identical to your bank's login screen. However, this login screen is actually fake because the scammers have created a website that looks exactly like your bank's website. So, you type in your user ID and password into the fraudulent login screen, but instead of logging into your account, your information was sent to the scammer, who now has your online banking user ID and password. Usually the scammers will then log into your actual bank account and take out as much as they can. This is often done via electronic methods such as Zelle, wire transfer, ACH, and more. As we mentioned before, this scam is quite popular. So how do you protect yourself? Although it's not always easy, here's a quick list of things that you can do to protect yourself from phishing. Remember, rule number 1 of fraud protection is that if someone is reaching out to you and asking you to provide or input your personal information, this should be a major red flag. So, if you do receive an email or text like this, do not reply or click on anything. Instead, you should call the bank directly. That way, you know that you're speaking to an actual bank representative and not a criminal in their basement. Once again, this is probably the most important thing you can do to prevent fraud. Another tip to preventing phishing scams is to carefully read the email or text that you receive. Usually, if you look closely, you'll be able to notice that the email or text is potentially fraudulent. Some of the most common characteristics of fraud are misspelling and grammar errors. Many of these scams originate overseas. Therefore, the people writing the fraudulent emails and texts will usually include misspelled words, grammatical errors, and may even use uncommon words. This is especially true for communications from your bank because a major bank probably is not going to send you an email with misspelled words and improper grammar. Finally, do you even bank at this bank? If you receive a text from Citibank but you don't even bank with Citibank, then that should be a red flag as well. Here are a few examples of real smishing texts. These 4 texts were all sent to one person, 3 of which were sent almost a week apart. Luckily, this individual does not bank at any of these institutions, which is the first red flag. As you can see, each text is sent from a different phone number and the links included are all completely different. This is extremely suspicious for the connected text because most financial institutions will have their automated fraud messages coming from the same number. They also probably won't be sending texts from different area codes with completely different links. Take a moment to study the links. Huge red flag. Other subtle red flags that can be noted is the punctuation, lack of proper spacing and capitalization. Also, the grammar and writing style is not very common or proper. My personal favorite is the word cherry, which I actually had to look up. Remember, it's called phishing for a reason. The fraudsters are throwing out as many phishing lines as possible and waiting for people to bite. And many people fall for this every day. So hopefully we were able to provide some valuable information on how this scam works and how you can best protect yourself. The second type of fraud we'll discuss today is called imposter scams. These types of scams are very similar to phishing in the sense that fraudsters will pose as someone that they are not and use scare tactics to obtain your personal and/or financial information. For imposter scams, a criminal may pose as a representative from your bank or an important agency, and sometimes they may even pose as someone close to you. To give you an example of imposter fraud, a scammer might call you and pretend to be from the IRS. They tell you that you owe back taxes and that you're in danger of paying fines, penalties, and can even go to jail. Then they'll tell you that if you'd like to make the payment over the phone, everything can be cleared up. Another example is a scammer posing as a bank employee. The scammer will call and inform you that a large wire transfer is about to be withdrawn from your account. So they're just calling to verify the transaction. Of course, if you didn't process the large wire transfer, this could be troubling. The scammer then claims that they will stop the wire transfer, but first they need your personal information. There are many different tactics in imposter scams, but it all goes back to rule number 1 of fraud prevention. If someone is reaching out to you and asking for your personal information, then this is a major red flag. Do not provide the other person with any info. Instead, hang up the phone and call your bank or the IRS directly to confirm what's going on. That way, You can ensure that you're truly speaking with a representative from that organization. Another tip for preventing imposter scams is to research your specific situation. Remember, these scammers are committing these scams thousands of times over and over again, so it's likely that other people have already been scammed. So, if you Google the phone number, email address, or company name that reached out to you, then you might be able to recognize a scam before it's too late. Of course, fraudsters do their best not to leave a trail, so this may not always work. Imposter scams and phishing go hand in hand. Like we discussed before, the scammer is pretending to be someone that they're not. They will attempt to trick you or scare you into providing them with your personal information. So always remember that a legitimate company like a bank should never reach out to you and request your personal information. This includes information such as your social security number, driver's license number, date of birth, banking login, or password. A bank may ask some personal identifying questions if you call them, such as the last 4 numbers of your social or even your online banking user ID. But a bank will never ask you for your online banking password or debit card PIN number ever. So, anytime that you get a phone call, email, or text that is requesting your personal information, there's a good chance that it's fraud. Okay, so now we're going to pivot into 2 types of fraud that can be extra difficult to deal with. This type of fraud includes relationship scams and elder abuse. The reasons these can be extra difficult to deal with is because they prey on people who are vulnerable. And generally, when these scams work, the victim often loses a lot of money, sometimes even their entire life savings. We'll start with relationship scams. This is a scam where someone reaches out to a person and pretends to fall in love with them. It's very similar to catfishing, which many people have heard of. But in this case, the person doing the catfishing intends on taking money from the victim. Most relationship scams are started online, and usually the couple never meets. The fraudster will get their victim to pay for things and send them money. Throughout our many years in banking, we saw this a lot more often than you'd think. I once had a man come into the bank to close a savings account. The account had $120,000 in it, and he wanted to receive a cashier's check that was made payable to another person. So I started asking some questions about the transaction and what brought him into the bank. He shared with me that he and his girlfriend were going to combine their bank accounts. I then asked him why the check was made payable to only her and not himself. He shared with me that his girlfriend told him that she had already opened the new account and would call the bank to have him added on later. This was a major red flag to me. So I asked if he had ever met this person, and he said no. I explained to my customer why all of this sounded like potential fraud. I encouraged him to reconsider what he was about to do. I even suggested that he start with a small deposit to his girlfriend's account and then see what happens. Despite all my efforts to explain the situation, he walked out with a cashier's check for $120,000 made payable to a woman he had never even met. Sure enough, the man returned to the branch about a week later. After he deposited the $120,000, he never heard from his girlfriend again. So, he came in asking to place a stop payment on the check in hopes of getting the money back. Unfortunately, the check was already cashed, and that customer was unable to ever recover those funds. Now, that scenario probably sounds crazy to most of you. Trust me, it sounds crazy to us as well, but we promise you that this happens all the time. So, be aware of this scam. Even if it's not for your own good, you might be able to spot potential fraud before it happens to a family member or friend. This leads us to elder abuse. Elder abuse is similar to a relationship scam, but instead of taking advantage of someone who's lonely, the scammer takes advantage of someone who's elderly and vulnerable. Oftentimes, this is a relative. It can also be a caretaker or anyone else. So let's say Aunt Jane has $200,000 in the bank. She recently turned 90 years old and is starting to lose her ability to do things on her own. Her 20-year-old nephew is her caretaker. He quickly realizes that he's able to use Aunt Jane's money for his own needs. So he'll have Aunt Jane withdraw money for him to use, or he'll use Aunt Jane's checks and credit cards for his own use. Many times, the elderly victim doesn't even know that this is occurring. Once again, we bring this type of fraud up so that you're aware. And even if it's not occurring to you, it's possible that it might occur to someone that you love. So it's always helpful to be aware. Okay, so now we're going to pivot into some fraud that operates differently from anything we've discussed so far. This category consists of fraud such as lottery scams, prize scams, and employment scams. These fraud scams have been around for a long time. However, these days, many of these scams occur online and via social media. The best way to explain these is probably with some examples. So we'll start with a scam that many people have probably heard of, which is the Nigerian fraud scam. This is one of the most well-known fraud scams out there. This scam is actually hundreds of years old, but the version most people are aware of became popular in the 1990s. Back then, the fraud was mostly done via a paper letter received in the mail. The victim would receive a letter from a Nigerian prince or some other high-ranking position. The prince would state that their personal fortune was currently at risk due to war, corruption, or political unrest. They're desperate to get their money out of their country and into safekeeping. And guess where they want to keep their money? In your bank account. Once you provide them with your bank account information, fraud starts to occur. This fraud has taken on many forms, and oftentimes the scammer will use real-life current events. Today, for example, instead of a Nigerian prince, you might receive a message from a Ukrainian businessman. The fraudsters use real-life events to make the fraud sound more believable. Lottery scams operate under the same premise. You'll be informed that you've somehow won a lottery that you've never entered. Then the scammers will ask for your bank account information to send you the payment. Prize scams consist of you winning a cool prize, such as an iPad or a new car. The prize is yours, but you first need to provide them with your bank account information. One twist on these types of scams is that instead of directly asking for your bank account information, the scammers may ask you to send them a payment to handle taxes, shipping, or processing. So before you can collect on your 5 million lottery winnings, you'll need to send them a $500 processing fee. This is similar to how employment scams work. Employment scams target people who are looking for work. Scammers place ads via online, social media, newspapers, etc. They will inform you that you've been hired for a job and ask you for all of your personal information, including bank account info for direct deposit. This can set you up for identity theft and bank fraud. Employment scams also involve asking you to pay them for starter kits, training, or certifications that are useless. Another twist involves the scammers bringing their victim into a fake check scam. This is where you deposit a check from your new employer, and the employer then asks you to send them money back, usually for overpayment. They may also ask you to purchase gift cards with the money. Eventually, the check will bounce, usually after you've already sent the money to the scammer. Your account will be overdrawn, and you now owe this money to the bank. The best way to protect yourself from these types of scams is to ask yourself if it sounds too good to be true. Did you really enter that lottery or drawing for an iPad? You can also do some research. If you were sent a letter and or a check, research some of the information like the company name or bank name. Are they even real? What info can you find out about them online? Like we mentioned before, some of you may be thinking, how could anyone fall for any of this? But the truth is that it happens every day. Remember, scammers target thousands of people every day. You might think that this would never be you, and you may be correct. But what about your parents, your grandparents, or someone else that you love? It's great to educate ourselves, but sometimes it's great to educate those around us as well. We'll close out today's fraud discussion by reviewing a few more types of fraud. Since we've already covered so much information, we're going to breeze through the rest of this a bit quicker. The next type of fraud is investment scams. In 2022, consumers lost over $3.8 billion to investment scams, which is more than any other fraud category. Investment scams consist of things like Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes. They also include newer scams that revolve around making money with cryptocurrency. To protect yourself from investment scams, you should always do your homework before investing. Also, always remember that there's no such thing as a guaranteed return. So if anyone is offering you guaranteed returns that are way above the market average, it's probably a scam. Next, we'll briefly discuss card fraud. Credit card and debit card fraud is a massive fraud industry. Fraudsters try many different and creative ways to access your personal information. Much of this type of fraud can be avoided just by protecting your personal info, as we've discussed several times today. But sometimes fraud is unavoidable. An example of this is when fraudsters attach a skimming device onto an ATM to steal your card information. These devices are usually very small and difficult to notice. Thankfully, consumers aren't usually liable for card fraud. After filing a fraud claim, you'll more than likely receive your money back. For additional fraud protection, we highly recommend using a credit card over a debit card. For more information on this, check out our video titled 3 Reasons to Stop Using Your Debit Card. The final type of fraud that we'll discuss today is online shopping fraud. This is another type of fraud that is so widespread that it was labeled as the second most common type of fraud in 2022. Online shopping fraud has many different layers, but they all usually revolve around a business that either doesn't exist or doesn't provide services paid for. For items purchased online with a debit or credit card, you can file a fraud claim with your bank or credit card company. However, if you've made your purchase with a payment method like Zelle, Venmo, or Cash App, you might not be able to recover your funds. So, use caution when shopping online from unknown retailers, especially if the only type of payment they accept is Zelle or Venmo. Okay, now that's our conversation about current fraud scams and how to protect yourself. These days, there's so many different types of scams that it's hard to keep track. That makes it difficult for consumers to be aware of how to completely avoid it. So we hope that the information we provided today was useful and that you learned a few new ways to protect yourself from fraud. We completely understand that we covered a lot of information today, so if you have any questions, please ask us in the comments below. We're more than happy to help. We also can be reached via email at info@herobanker.com. Thank you again for taking time out of your day so that we can help you become your own financial hero. We hope to see you again soon. If you'd like to see more content like this, we would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Hero Banker on social media for updates on banking, finance, the economy, and more. Thank you.